Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another bout of Propagandacast news. Yes, indeed, we got quite a bit of news here as of late. And in this case, it's another survey from Relic. Another survey. This time a bit more specific than the last one. Mostly focused on campaigns like, how do we want a campaign? Sort of a lot of the same questions, Do we want multiple campaigns? Just maybe shorter, Like, for example, maybe a German campaign. Obviously not directly set, but, you can sort of figure with a lot of armies with campaigns. The Germans are probably amongst those. So that's sort of one of the things, asking about campaign maps, which you thought was a bit of a curious question. Which games fit them best? As a bit strange, linearity, non-linearity. There's also, again, asking about morale mechanics, Nothing sort of specific, more or less the same question as last time with, some, what do you mean when you talk about you love morale mechanics, that sort of question, trying to have you fill out the blanks there so then sort of know what to look for, what you might be anticipating or expecting from the morale mechanics. So that's, for example, one thing there they sort of been asking about. The more interesting bit about this survey is another sort of thing that's repeated is, the question of theatre, but this time it was a lot more specific. Basically, it was the Mediterranean theatre, Libya, Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, and southern France for some reason. I mean, there have been some fighting in southern France, but not exactly anything, pivotal for the Second World War. So, I mean, that was sort of it there, They pretty much seem to in there, and again, that's also, again, what I think you should overall, again, Italy 1943 is, as far as I'm concerned, also, I think the perfect place to take Company 3. Timing-wise, it's just, sort of, Wehrmacht was sort of roughly at its peak. Most of the other arms weren't, doing too poorly either. A lot of new equipment was appearing, while there was still a lot of old equipment around, Panther 3s, Panther 4s, Stugs, Panthers, Tigers, M3 Grants, Lees, Shermans, M10 tank destroyers, all of those things. So just a huge sort of mix there. Plus in Italy had the colonial troops, the Gurkhas, the Indians, I think even some of the Anzac. And well, let's not talk about the French colonial troops. They kind of raped their way through southern Italy, so I think we best stay away from that one. But overall, a lot of things. Then of course also just varied terrain there from Sicily to southern Italy to central Italy, and there's a lot of ground to cover there. I think a lot of sort of varied terrain that can be covered there. So I mean, in that regard, I think Italy 1943 just be perfect for it. I mean, you could also of course do North Africa. I mean, Tunisia would probably better suited for it, but personally, I just think Italy 1943 just works better. So that was that. That was one more weirder question, like what was this front called? Is this a history test? And like did you consider this the Western Front, the early Western Front, or the Mediterranean Front? Well, it's the Mediterranean Front, obviously, from anyone who's actually read about the war. None of the Allies considered it. Stalin didn't consider it the Western Front. The Americans and the Brits didn't consider it the Western Front. They were very much focused on France for that one. They all wanted that one. So, I mean, the Mediterranean Front is just that. I mean, I suppose if you sort of go for how the Germans probably just heap scorn upon Mussolini, you might have them call it Mussolini's arse front, but I think that's about it. You sort of get there, besides it being, the Mediterranean Front, the Italian Front, the Southern Front. I mean, it was never the Western Front down there. It was not the primary front at any point. I think at most they sort of hoped they could draw down some German troops there. But of course, the counter-argument was the Germans were able to draw down a lot of Allied troops and equipment there. I mean, Kesselring was able to do quite well there with incredibly limited resources, which included not a lot of panzer divisions that increasingly pulled away towards the Western Front and the Eastern Front, the actual Western Front. So that's sort of largely what's there with the survey, campaigns and more specific frontage. So again, I mean, unless they sort of got to pull up a lot more surveys just asking about other fronts, I'm getting the impression they're sort of quickly zooming in on the Mediterranean, North Africa, Italy. Again, I prefer Italy, and hell, I mean, I think actually before they cancelled it because of Companies Online, curse that game, they actually were considering an Italian expansion for Company of Heroes. So in that regard, they probably got some old research they could draw upon as well. So I kind of feel like just Italy 1943 are the best places. Again, overall so far they're pushing it with the survey, asking for the survey. I think that's where we're moving in. And I'll probably also get around to making a video with my sort of further thoughts on morale mechanics, because I really think they could do some pretty cool stuff, while at the same time, not making things too complex. So there you go, your bit of Propagandacast news as more news comes to you. And of course, if you like my videos, like, share, subscribe, and of course, comment. And if you like what I do on a daily basis, do consider donating or pledging on Patreon. Links in the video description. Of course, all big thanks to my Patreon supporters, without which this episode surely would not be possible. So thank you all, and see you all another time for another video. Cheers.